Hey everyone, Mr. Happy here, and today I'm going to talk a bit about Final Fantasy XI. Now, at the recent Japanese fan festival for Final Fantasy XIV, they briefly touched upon the new 24-man raid being added in the Dawn Trail expansion, Echoes of Vana'diel. They revealed this a couple of months prior, but said they would have new art to show us when we got to the JP fan festival. Now, with that, we got the first key art for the raid, and it was this. Now, to those who haven't played Final Fantasy XI, this image looks like some cool demon dude with a big sword, but this character is Final Fantasy XI's original villain, dubbed the Shadow Lord. Now, while I did open up a link shell on Bahamut and invited Final Fantasy XIV players to hop into the adventure with the help of some fellow high-level players if they wanted to enjoy the story, I know many of you won't take that dive. So you're wondering who the Shadow Lord even is, at least in the context of Final Fantasy XI. So here is a brief overview of this character, his background, role in the story, and some extended lore that was revealed across the other expansions. This doesn't mean he will be exactly this character in Final Fantasy XIV, but it never hurts to have some idea, right? Before we talk about the Shadow Lord, though, this video has a sponsor, and it's none other than Final Fantasy VII Ever Crisis. This free-to-play game lets you replay entries from the Final Fantasy VII series with a mix of updated retro graphics and modern remake-style graphics. Utilize its familiar ATB combat system to play through parts of Final Fantasy VII, Crisis Core, and even the new original First Soldier's story. You get to meet Sephiroth in his youth and get to dive a little deeper into that while playing as some other new characters. Now, right now you can enjoy the holiday spirit with the Holy Flames Gift event. See what Avalanche has planned for the holidays while earning tons of rewards. You can even take a shot at getting unique weapons for Barret and Aerith, as well as a holiday-themed outfit for Aerith herself. Now, not only is Ever Crisis available on iOS and Android, but it also very recently released on Steam. This had me pumped when I saw it, and it runs so smooth. Link your mobile data to Steam and continue from where you left off on mobile. You can even log in before January 7th to get a bonus 1,000 crystals to help you get some weapons. So if you want to try out Final Fantasy VII Ever Crisis and support the channel, simply click the link in the description or use the QR code on the screen and give the game a shot. Thanks to Square Enix again for sponsoring this video, and with that, let's talk a little bit about Final Fantasy XI. Now, Final Fantasy XI's story begins in the year 884 in the Crystal Era, but Shadow Lord's history dates back over 30 years prior to this. Earlier in the century, a Galkan by the name of Ral Grim was born and assigned the role of the Tail Keeper. Now, the Galkans are a physically massive race that possess no traditional means of procreation. Instead, when they feel their death is imminent, they travel to their homeland in the region of Kuzotz on the Quan continent and pass away at the base of a huge mountain. They are then reborn as a young child who often wanders back to the civilization they hailed from without any memory of their previous life. Now, the Tail Keeper is a special Galka, gifted with the ability to not only remember their previous life, but the lives of Tail Keepers prior, dating back a couple hundred of years. Their purpose is to preserve their history and provide guidance to others, though this role is expanded upon more greatly in the recent Voracious Resurgence storyline. Maybe we'll get to that some other time. Now, Ral Grim was a beloved Tail Keeper and a member of the Mithril Musketeers military unit of Bastok. Through his experiences in the city and in the Musketeers, he came to develop many friendships and receive the adoration of the citizens. But in his head, he came to question the actions of his fellow man. He had issues with the way the Humes in particular, and the other enlightened races, disregarded cultures they didn't understand, and relentlessly provoked and attacked the beastmen they shared the land with. He often would sympathize with them, spare them in battles and expeditions, and for those who knew what was going on, they definitely didn't take kindly to it. Eventually, his paths would cross with a young woman named Cornelia, who comforted and confided in Ral Grim her struggles and adventures, eventually joining the Musketeers herself. Over time, this led to a romance developing between the two, something that was completely forbidden by both Galkans and Humes. This caught the attention of a fellow Mithril Musketeer, Ulrich, whose jealousy would lead him down a dark path and nearly doom all of existence. Now, 32 years before the game's events begin, Ral Grim, Ulrich, and Cornelia are joined by members of the other nations on a multinational expedition to the Northlands, a land infested with ancient ruins and dark evils. Their expedition was a complete failure, with the 6 fighters being overwhelmed by the forces they strove against, though there were no casualties, initially. They eventually split up to scout more of the land, leaving Ulrich and Ral Grim seemingly alone. Ulrich jumped at this opportunity to wound Ral Grim and take his revenge. However, when he went to deliver the killing blow, Cornelia jumped in front of the blade and sacrificed herself. Ulrich was beside himself for what he had done to his love interest and fled, reporting both of them missing and likely dead, fallen down a ravine. Ral Grim stayed with Cornelia and slowly succumbed to the cold and his wounds. Through his final moments, he began to channel the Galkin's signature rage, a curse left to the entire race from a bygone era. This caught the notice of a dark energy within the land, belonging to none other than the Avatar of Darkness, Odin. Seeing his rage, he revived the Tailkeeper in a new form, none other than the Shadow Lord. Fueled by his hatred for the Enlightened races and his sympathies for the Beastmen, he united as many of the Beastmen as he could and began the Crystal War, the war to end all humanity. Now, there are a lot more details about the war itself, much like you'd hear in the old history books. There's exact battle dates, results, casualty numbers, the whole 9 yards. What matters most is that, in the end, the Shadow Lord was defeated, his energy sealed within the very throne room from which he oversaw his army in the heart of the Northlands. The Beastmen dispersed and continued to fend for themselves as they had before the war. Now, about 20 years after the end of the war, the Beastmen began acting suspiciously. They appear more organized, have better weapons and armor, and are more aggressively approaching civilizations and their trade routes in order to loot them. A young adventurer is thrust into this conflict, the player, and in the process uncovers the truth. The Shadow Lord's resurrection is at hand. The Beastmen utilize Magicite to channel a great and destructive power sufficient to bring the Shadow Lord back to life. Despite the efforts to prevent this, collecting Magicite samples and attempting to repair the damaged seal confining the Shadow Lord, he does indeed resurrect in the presence of the adventurer and a legendary Dark Knight Galka named Zaid. He chains Zaid and attempts to do battle with the adventurer and his allies, but to no avail, falling in battle once again. This time he regresses back to Ral Grim, where he comes to his senses and lets go of his rage. However, the events of the Rise of Xylard expansion begin at this very moment, with the Archduke of the Duchy of Juno and his brother revealing themselves to be part of a long-lost race called the Xylard. With the Shadow Lord's energies largely quelled, they summoned forth the Archangels, beings born from the Mother Crystals that channeled the impurities that plague the Enlightened races themselves. There might too much for any of you to contend with, Ral Grim takes the form of the Shadow Lord once more to buy you time to escape. With the last of his power, he welcomes the thought of joining Cornelia in the afterlife and finally perishes. Now, like I said, there is a lot of extended lore about the Shadow Lord, things that would become apparent in later expansions that we really just didn't know for the longest time. I won't go into too much of it, but here's a bit of a taste. Originally, it wasn't known that Odin had anything to do with Ral Grim's rebirth, though it was continually hinted at, especially throughout the Treasures of Ot-Urgan expansion and other questlines as well. In the most recent Voracious Resurgence storyline, it's outright confirmed, as it's revealed that the Galkin process of rebirth is a boon granted by Odin himself, resurrecting them in the heart of Valhalla for an inevitable war. As part of this conflict, one to destroy the monstrosity known only as Chaos, he resurrects the Shadow Lord to do battle once more. While he largely buys time for the adventure again, his efforts do allow the player to ready their legendary prime weapon and strike a killing blow, bringing the ancient threat to an end. In many ways, the Shadow Lord is an incredibly tragic character, and you do get cutscenes for pretty much all of the stuff I've described here in the game. It's a lot of text to read through, but considering this is the initial villain that was conceived for the start of the game, the initial 6 ranked missions, it does a lot for that initial character, and one that was definitely beloved by many, even though he was gone all too quickly. Of course, his death setting into motion several other events that I did not get into in this video, of course, kind of kept him fresh in our minds, and again, he gets featured a lot in the Voracious Resurgence, especially towards the later parts, once you uncover the kind of nitty-gritty of what's happening in the story. Do I think they'll do anything like this for the 14 equivalent? It's hard to say. They might make him a tragic character with a tragic backstory, but he could just as easily be summed up as some overlord of the Beastmen. It's hard to even tell what bosses may precede him, as I'm kind of betting he's going to be the final boss of the first Alliance raid. He sets in motion so many other things when he's defeated that if they're trying to stay close to some of the storylines and how they're told, while of course rewriting them into Final Fantasy XIV themselves, then yeah, I feel like he has to be. The Beastmen Kings are of course a possibility. He does rule over several of the Beast tribes and gives them a lot of power in the process, but there's also several demons and dark dragons and Ahriman that he could very easily rule over as well. There's also advanced versions of the Shadow Lord, an entirely dream world run by the avatar of Diabolos, where he basically just goes even more crazy and just takes over an entire realm. He destroys pretty much everything in that realm and becomes this nigh unkillable god. Of course, that's what it's supposed to be in the lore, but you know, we're kind of a lot stronger now than we used to be. So the Dynamis Lord, as he's called there, doesn't hold up nearly as much. Either way, I figured that some of you might want a spattering of lore after seeing the Shadow Lord's picture. Now, there is one other thing. The circle that is behind him is what is known as a burning circle. It is a term that the players in Final Fantasy XI use to designate a battlefield area in the game's, well, base areas, I suppose. You walk up to it, and as long as you have the requisite item or the requisite quest active, you can enter and do battle with a boss of many, many kinds. It just draws out the evils of orbs and also allows you to enter certain areas of the Beastman stronghold, although it's really always the exact same looking battlefield. Basically, he lays these things down and the Beastmen use them in order to hide away in the deepest recesses of those areas, and it's not good for anyone. It's also very prominently featured inside of Castle Zaval, where he actually resides in the throne room. They are all over the place and used as teleportation even, so they have a few different functions, and I suppose we'll probably be seeing those on the ground as well. And with that, that's going to be a wrap. Be sure to like and subscribe, and if you're looking for more Final Fantasy XI lore, just wait. I'm trying to only do relevant lore to whatever they show us in the key art and whatnot, and we've got a long time before 7.1, so I'm sure this won't be the last Final Fantasy XI story-related video that I have to share with you, especially throughout the entirety of the Dawn Trail expansion. But thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next one, and until then, take care.